rights organization. This chronic underfunding undermines our collective efforts to reduce inequality, foster inclusive growth, and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Women's rights organizations, especially those led by grassroots and marginalized communities, are among the most effective champions of rights, justice, and transformative development. Yet, paradoxically, they continue to be structurally excluded from financing framework, limiting their ability to lead the change our world so urgently needs. In this context, feminist funds have emerged as critical actors in bridging that gap. These feminist public foundations mobilize and distribute resources directly in grassroots movements, especially those working at the intersection of gender, race, class, and geography. Rooted in trust-based, participatory, and movement-aligned practices, women's funds provide not only financial support, but also technical accompaniment, political solidarity, and sustained investment in social change. By acting as feminist intermediaries, they challenge traditional donor models, making financing more equitable, responsive, and ultimately transformative. Today's panel brings together a diverse group of feminist funds working national, regional, and global levels. And we will also highlight practical pathways to expand direct, flexible, and sustained funding for women's rights and feminist organizations. Our discussion will continue to explore how feminist funds strengthen grassroots movements, build feminist financial ecosystems, and advocate for systemic reforms in global financing systems. The objective is clear: to demonstrate how feminist funding models can close the gender financing gap and meaningfully advance inclusive right-based development. We aim to elevate feminist funds as essential partners in the financing for development agenda, and to issue concrete recommendations for donors and institutions to scale up their support for feminist movement as part of a just and transformative financing framework. Reclaiming this 1% is not only a matter of justice, it is a strategic imperative of building a global financial architecture that serves both people and planet and truly leaves no one behind. Thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to a rich, inspiring, and action-oriented discussion. With that, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Mamadou Bobo Diallo, economic specialist who works on macroeconomic issues and the care economy in UN Women's Economic Empowerment section. Mamadou, I have a question for you. UN Women has a mandate to advance gender equality across sustainable development goals. From your vantage point, what opportunities exist to position feminist movements and grassroots women's organizations as leaders, not just as beneficiaries, in shaping economic policy and development priorities? Over to you, Mamadou.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to these issues. The first thing I would like to say is to just set the background under which we are operating today. As many of you know, we are in this current context where there's significant pushback globally on the issue of gender equality. Any issue, every time we discuss the issue of gender equality, there's been a strong pushback. We're operating in the context of post-pandemic, where today more than like 3.3 billion people live in countries that spend more interest payment on debt than on either education or healthcare. You know, for the first time in decade, the share of ODA, which is official development assistance, which is earmarked, right, for gender equality objective, has declined, dropping from 45% pre-pandemic to about 40% now. So this is where, you know, we are operating. From UN Women perspective, as a human rights organization and the organization with a global mandate on gender, our venue, our channel to address gender equality is through a human rights perspective, right? We know and we understand that, you know, there's ample evidence with research that's already shown that the current economic model has failed to account and actively undermine fundamental principle of human right and dignity. And so we need to revisit that. And this is where UN Women is taking us in terms of changing, having a paradigm shift, that we think is required, that conceptualize and construct economy with a gender equality and human right as the core tenet. And that's where I think from the perspective of UN Women, working with government through normative frameworks, that center the gender equality, framing them in terms of right, as a way of making sure that human right-based framework, which we understand, help facilitate, right, the development of more equitable, non-discriminatory system that really actively advance gender equality, and that also allow us to make sure that both fundamental human rights and are really important, right, for achieving the SDGs, which is where we are gathered today. At the fourth conference of financing for development. UN Women has been actively engaged in this process. We're encouraged to see that many of the issues that UN Women has pushed to address gender equality and promote the rights of women have been adopted. We're encouraged, for instance, to see that the current draft outcome document has a focus on care, strong language in the draft that include calls to increase investment in the care economy to boost family labor force participation, strengthening social protection, promoting decent working condition also for caregivers, because this is also one important aspect of UN Women work. At the rework, both at global regional level, at the global level, at the regional level. Last 2 years ago, UN Women worked with ECLAC, bringing together about 26 countries from the region to adopt the Buenos Aires Commitment, which outlined an ambitious roadmap toward a caring society that recognizes access to care as a human right. UN Women is also one of the leading agencies that works with ILO, ECLAC, OHCSR, and UNDP to develop a UN-wide system guidance on transforming care system to bring all the UN agencies together to have a common vision on how to address the issue of care in this system. Thank you. I can stop here.
Thank you so much, Bobo. That was really insightful to speak to the Compromiso de Sevilla. It has now been adopted, and it's got 70 commitments that 70 plus commitments governments have made. Several of them pertain to gender equality. So the work is cut out for us. It's about implementation. How do we approach? Go from here. It took a long time, including all UN agencies, the amount of contributions you have done to make sure your priorities are included in the outcome document. Now it's time for action. And in this point, it's crucial for civil society organizations, along with private sector and member states and UN agencies to really collaborate to make sure these promises become reality. So thank you for raising the issue of ODA. Allocation of resources are key, but at the same time, you bring up the issue of collaboration and partnership across aisle to make sure what is being promised can be delivered. So thank you for your perspective. With that, I would like to bring our next speaker, Emily Forhman, who is the Executive Director of Women First International Fund. Emily, thank you so much for your leadership, for the time and commitment to advancing women's rights through Women First International. And truly appreciate the opportunity we have to partner on this event during the Financing for Development Conference. As some of you know, I chair the NGO Committee on Financing for Development. And through that process, I'm able to bring in women first perspective, especially on advancing women's rights in these discussions. So grateful for Emily's leadership in the space and the opportunity to share some of her perspective as to why it's important for us to engage in the space. So Emily, may I ask you a question? What unique role does Women First play in advancing feminist development, financing, and how does your model disrupt traditional top-down donor approaches to ensure resources actually reach grassroots women leaders. And may I also request Anna or somebody else from Women First to post the questions in the chat so everybody sort of sees where Emily is going to come from. Over to you, Emily. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anita, and thanks to everyone joining us today. And I want to make a special thanks to Doreen, who will speak shortly, for bringing her direct experience and voice to this conversation, which is crucial. It's really such a joy to be in a room full of people who believe, like we do, that funding feminist work isn't charity, it's strategy. And being here at the UN, where so many global commitments are made, as Bobo mentioned, reminds us how powerful it is when feminist voices lead not just the fight, but also the funding. I'm speaking obviously from the perspective of my own organization, Women First. And what we do is we move resources and directly support very small and emerging grassroots women-led organization. And as Anita mentioned, less than 1% of official development assistance reaches these groups directly. And that's not just merely a funding gap, it's a structural failure, and that's why we're here today. At Women First, we are part of a growing network of feminist funds that believe real change does not come from the top down. It starts at the grassroots, with women, girls, and gender diverse people who know the problems firsthand and have the best ideas for the solutions. We specifically focus on economic empowerment as one way to advance gender equality. Women First exists to fill this glaring funding gap and to show up when and how it matters for the most underfunded and excluded change makers. Here's basically how we're different. We show up early as a funder and early in the life of the organization. We are often the first funder for grassroots organizations led, as I said, by those most excluded, including LGBTQ activists, Indigenous and caste-oppressed women, refugees, and women with disabilities, among others. Many of these groups run on less than $50,000 a year operating budget. And while they lack resources, they are creating bold new solutions that come directly from their communities to replace systems that have not worked for them, that others have developed. We offer the kind of support grassroots groups actually need. We provide long-term, flexible funding for their core work. We offer one-to-one hands-on help supporting our partners with budgeting, strategic planning, communications, and fundraising to strengthen their organizational capacity. We convene safe spaces to help groups learn from one another and build connections, making women-led organizations stronger when they work together towards shared goals. We intentionally really reject traditional donor-grantee power dynamics. We view the groups we fund as partners in our strategy, not just recipients of money. We recognize that people who have faced challenges, they're the experts on solving those challenges. We do not control how these women do their work. We encourage and fund them to participate in global decision-making spaces so their voices are uplifted and taken into consideration. And we listen. I think that this is something that's so important about Women First. We listen, we adjust our approach, we step back when needed while engaging our partners in decision-making forums for our own organization. And so, kind of to wrap it up, we're not just offering charity, we're investing in sustainable solutions that work and help organizations transform their communities from the ground up and to become sustainable entities as the challenges facing these communities is only intensifying.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for sharing with us the unique partnership board model that you spearheaded. You are the executive director that brought this unique partnership model to Women First. And we are proud that we have come a long way since then, really building partnerships on the ground with our grantees. So I think I would like to invite Doreen next, because we are with our partner, Doreen, who is on the ground, who is really speaking to Women First impact on the ground. So Doreen, Doreen is the executive director. Doreen Kalugira is the executive director of Women of Influence based in Tanzania. Doreen, if I may ask you a question, Women of Influence works with women entrepreneurs and leaders in Tanzania facing deep economic and social challenges. What are some of the main obstacles you are addressing, and how does the chronic underfunding of grassroots women's rights group affect your ability to respond meaningfully in these contexts? Doreen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anita. It is an honor to be speaking at this panel. The challenges that Women of Influence works to address are ignorance of the law among grassroots women. What we do is we create awareness about social rights, economic rights through our legal community clubs. The other challenge is economic exclusion and informality among women entrepreneurs at the grassroots. What we do is we impart them with business skills. We help them to formalize their businesses. We help them in searching for friendly opportunities, for example, loans, but also we help them in the application of the loans, starting from filling the forms, attesting their documents, but also in the interpretation of the contents of the forms, loan forms. So that's what we do, and we do it under our Kilinge cha Sheria project, which is supported by Women First International Fund. With the chronic underfunding, it affects our work greatly. Before talking about that, allow me to draw a picture of the grassroots organizations in Tanzania. Many of the grassroots organizations in Tanzania are being founded by young women leaders who at a certain point, they have undergone violence, they have survived violence, they have witnessed violence in their communities. So they start these organizations so as to break the chain of violence. Therefore, they do the work out of passion. And once their work is shaken due to the chronic underfunding, it is affecting their dream. So this is how the chronic underfunding affects us. First, with few resources, you find that fewer women and girls are empowered. So you find that in the communities, the demand is high. For example, for us, we are in Kigogo. When we did the baseline, we reached around 500 women entrepreneurs. But in the 5 women entrepreneurs, all had the same problems of lacking market, lacking capital, but also lacking business skills. But in our projects, we just work with 45 women, meaning that the 455 women are excluded because we have not enough funds so as to help them. And on many occasions, our beneficiaries have relatives and friends. They see that their lives are improving. So they come to our office to ask if they can enroll within our program, but we have to decline, meaning we feel like we are failing community, or sometimes community feels that we are excluding them within our projects. All that is because of the underfunding or chronic funding. The other issue is the chronic underfunding also affects the way we do our activities. You find that we grassroots organizations have small budgets. Therefore, we design activities depending on the budget, not depending on the project. So you find that we do exclude important activities which would have brought an impact. You'd find that an organization has a small budget, goes with one activity, and yet on the plan, they have series of activity. The other issue is sometimes the modality of doing an activity changes. For example, for us, we have the activity of an exhibition. The intention of the exhibition was that women at the grassroots, their products are not visible, and yet they have the best products and the cheapest products. So we said that we could take them to the exhibitions, that is Sabasaba, to case show their products, but we couldn't because taking them was expensive. So we opted to go with them going as spectators. Yes, them going as spectators played an impact, but taking them to case show their products would have played a very, very big impact. The other issue is when we are doing our work, we are working with a team, but you find that we don't compensate them. We just give them allowances. We don't give them salaries. As a result, the team members sometimes feel drained. They feel like you're using them. So that has contributed to the high staff turnover among grassroots organizations. Or sometimes it affects our work. The time that I could have used in implementing a project, I'm using it to recruit a team member and giving them skills. Last week, I have this volunteer who helped us to design the digital mobile application. So I wanted to do some updates. So when I called him over the past 2 weeks. Then I called him again. He says, you see, madam, you are just giving me transport allowance and you are just giving me food allowances. I have a family, I have to cater for my family. So I give other people's work priority. So up to now, the application is not updated. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doreen, for sharing with us the incredible service you provide in your community, even while facing such challenges that come out of chronic underfunding. I also wanted to bring this up in this context of financing for development. The Financing for Development Conference is happening in Sevilla with member states, with private sector, with government agencies, with finance ministers in this meeting. But rarely do you hear voices of grassroots women, right? And so that's why it's important that when we submitted a request for this side event, that it was important that it be accepted, because this voice is valuable and powerful. We run into challenges because we only look at the macro level perspective. We do not look at how macro level translates to people on the ground. Policy decisions are important, but how it gets to people and the planet is crucial. So such as Doreen's work she's doing, it's important that this FFD4 Compromiso de Sevilla really becomes a transformational power, that it changes lives of people on the ground. So thank you for sharing that perspective. We will use that towards advocacy, to strengthening advocacy with member states, with UN agencies, so that this voice is heard more often in the corridors of the UN and at these international conferences. So thank you for sharing your concerns with us, and also the incredible work you're doing within your community. With that, I would like to welcome our fourth speaker, Carolyn Boyd, Executive Director of Ecumenical Women's Initiative, but here you are representing Fund Her Now. Carolyn, if I may ask you a question, Her Now brings together women's funds to mobilize resources and drive collective impact. Why is this collaboration so critical right now? And how does it challenge conventional ideas? But who gets to be a donor, and what meaningful giving actually looks like? Over to you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Well, I've been active in this sector for more than 30 years now, and I've experienced some tumultuous times, but I don't think I've ever experienced the seismic changes that are today hitting civil society. I mean, they aren't just any old change. What I'm seeing is a well-orchestrated assault on the infrastructure of community-led, rights-based civil society. And the lack of funding that we've been hearing about is increasing competitiveness as CSOs desperately try to secure income for their essential work, so reducing civil society solidarity. And this isn't by chance. It's clear that this is a political tool to disempower the sector and silence opposition voices. You know, in ways it feels like we're in one of those crazy films when the planet's orbit glitches and everything starts falling apart. And then when that happens, a small group of people usually find a way to survive by building a new society. And it was Charles Darwin, I think, who said it's not the strongest of the species that survives, it's the one that's most adaptable to change. So as a women's fund myself, I think I can say with confidence that we are agile by nature, making it perhaps easier to adapt to changing environments. And we also make it a business to understand how money moves. The tremors signaling the current funding tsunami that's hitting us, I think we felt several years back. So what did we do? We retreated. And we retreated in the true sense of the word. We took time to step back, self-examine, reorganize and reposition ourselves to become stronger, asking ourselves what we needed to put in place to make us more resilient to external threats and be able to not only keep mobilizing resources, but increase flows of money to the grassroots in light of the unfolding crisis. I should add, for those that don't know us, that women's funds come from and are deeply rooted in the women's movement. Women trust us, so it was vital that we were able to weather the storm, especially as a report from AWID this year showed that 55% of all women's organisations rely on women's funds for the majority of their funding. So from this collective retreat, one of several new mechanisms which appeared was a seemingly ad hoc group of 6 women's funds engaging in Latin America, East Africa, Western Balkans, and the Middle East, of which my fund is a member, and also Women First. Without any common geographies, we quickly saw how we could foster collaboration, mentorship, and linkages across regions which are historically under-resourced and marginalized, and which continuously endure the consequences of global shifts and tensions. More importantly, we came together because we believed in feminist collaboration and shared governance as core working principles. So we came together in the spirit of feminist collaboration and established a funding cohort called Fund Her Now. And with the ambition not only to unlock new funding, but to be a movement building platform designed to scale up private sector support for gender equity. In the face of an increasingly competitive and hostile funding environment, we look to demonstrate tangible solidarity in resource mobilization to change the narrative. And this ensured equal spaces for ideas and access to the table, regardless of the size of those funds participating. Our approach we saw as an antidote to the current funding trends seeking to fragment civil society and create highly competitive funding conditions. So organizations like the ones we heard in Tanzania vie for one another for the crumbs off the table, which drives division and weakens movements. I truly believe this kind of collaboration is more essential than ever because the challenges facing women's rights and gender equality are global. They're deeply connected and increasingly urgent. When we come together in funding cohorts rooted in shared governance, we amplify our collective power, pool our resources, and move decision-making closer to the grassroots, closer to those leading change on the front lines. It also challenges the old donor-recipient model by proving that those living the realities are not just beneficiaries, they are bold strategists and powerful givers. This is what meaningful giving looks like. It's not charity from above, but solidarity, shared leadership, and a commitment to lasting transformative solutions. Reflecting on the statistics of 1% of ODA funding reaching women's rights organizations directly, this is the polar opposite. By allocating funding to NGOs and global institutions, it denies women and those most marginalized the right to determine and lead the very changes they are driving. When women are sidelined in this way, they are treated not as agents of change, but as objects. Maybe it's time to throw out the conventional rulebook to a system that is glitching. We have the ear of the women's movement at the grassroots. The old school of project funding is putting huge strain on small organizations, and we've heard this. Grassroots groups and organizations are calling out for support for the infrastructure that supports movements, core operational support, movement building, and coalition development, communication and advocacy infrastructure, network building, and collaboration. So to close, I believe it's no longer about them and us, funders and beneficiaries, but about the collective us in a united sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you for raising all the important issues that we need to be cognizant of if you're serious about making meaningful impact for women on the ground. So solidarity, shared leadership, take time to step back and review, just like you said. It is important to take time back, to step back, just like Women First did during COVID, where we stepped back, we took time to understand how we can support our grantees during this process, during the COVID challenges. It's important for organizations to do that. It's not a vicious cycle that keeps going. We keep funding and we don't make impact, but it is important to revisit how are we making impact. We also talked about the issue of access to table, which is crucial. If women are not at the table, issues about women are not going to get discussed. It's important, not only women at the leadership level, women on the grassroots level. It's important everybody's at the table. So thank you for challenging the current donorship recipient model. Thank you for your insights on that topic. And we look forward to continuing the conversation as we come around to you more. Thank you. So with that, I would like to come back to Mamadou. My question for you is, we often hear about the enabling environment. Now, for us coming from the NGO Committee and FfD, that's a really loaded 2 words, because enabling environment, many times it's about facilitating private sector access to these spaces. And so, which means a return on investment. which is not. Enabling environment should be across the board for every person who is involved in that. It should be an enabling environment. Then only we can make the meaningful impact. So my question is, we often hear about the enabling environment needed for gender just financing. Given persistent structural inequalities, how can global financing frameworks better address intersecting forms of discrimination, such as gender, race, class, and geography, to remove systemic obstacles that block funds from reaching grassroots women's rights organization and shift decision-making power closer to the most affected? Over to you, Bobo.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree with you with the distinction you made on how people perceive the concept of enabling environment and the role of the public sector. I must say, at least from UN Women perspective, we see it differently. When we talk about enabling environment, we're talking about much broader definition, not just a focus on the private sector, but the role, for instance, of the public sector, the role of the government in terms of regulating, financing the flow of capital, and the role of grassroots organization in creating this framework of accountability for many of the commitment, for instance, that the government makes. And in my earlier intervention, I highlighted the fact that our approach is always from the human rights perspective, and that comes with obligations, right, from the government to make this. Before making this commitment, once you make this commitment, you also have the obligation, right, to follow through this commitment through actual actions that can make this happen. And that's what I understand by enabling environment. And recently, UN Women worked with ILO and a whole group of feminist economists to come up with a framework on the concept of fiscal space, gender, public finance, and fiscal space, because we are operating in this environment where fiscal space is shrinking, public debt, the economy, the global trade imbalances and conflict. All of these issues come together, and what we're trying to do is develop this framework where we can identify alternative sources of financing to fund gender equality initiative. The care economy is one example that I highlighted. We have a whole tool that we developed to allow government to estimate the cost and return on investing, for instance, in care, the creation of jobs that comes by investing in the care economy, and making the case that investing in the care economy has return, economic return, but also social return, right? For society. It's good for the children that benefit from this, in the case of childcare, for instance, but also good for women to be able to re-enter the labor market. We know that discrimination in the labor market from the gender perspective is rampant, and that's because women enter and exit labor market because of those childbearing, right? And once they exit the labor market, it's very difficult to come back. So creating this framework, this environment, this enabling environment, allow women to re-enter the labor market and contribute to economic prosperity. So this is something that we hold dearly. So this framework on financing that we developed look at various aspects. The concept of fiscal space, using fiscal policy, taxes, because we know that tax are gender implication. The way tax laws are designed, some of these have biases against women, and we want to address that. That's one issue we try to address. Whether it's monetary policy, we think about monetary policy as this concept that is out there, high up there, but it has implication for women. When you increase interest rate, you increase taxes on consumption, this disproportionately affect women. So it has real implications. So that's one aspect also we're trying to address through monetary policy. There's broader, macro-prudential policies that we could also adopt that can have implication for gender equality. The debt issue that I discussed earlier, reprioritizing payment of debt. A new concept that came up. I was at the panel yesterday with the African Development Bank in Ivory Coast. And Ivory Coast is one of the first countries that has developed a debt swap for education, where the government, the World Bank, and some private entity come together to retire a very expensive debt, replace it by a longer term debt with low interest rate to make saving, right? In terms of resources and fund, about 500 million that was saved through this debt swap that allows now the country to invest in education, right? So this is something, this is a new way of approaching financing that have implication that can have long-term positive impact in terms of development. And what we're trying to push for instance, a debt swap for gender equality. Why not? Invest the proceed that you earn through the saving that you earn through swapping the debt, high expensive debt for gender equality initiative, a focus on maternal health care, a focus on education or training, or labor market reform to facilitate entry of women in male-dominated sector of the economy to eliminate that kind of labor market segmentation that exists. These are ideas that we propose in this framework, which is available on our website. I will share the link in the chat for people to take a look and have a sense of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobo, for sharing that perspective as to how UN Women is trying to transform the current scenario when it comes to gender equality. It's mentioned several times in the outcome document. So we have hope for really having some meaningful impact from these conversations. You also talked about the stark realities, but debt servicing. Debt servicing now exceeds health or education spending for 3.3 billion people, with many developing countries paying interest rates 4 to 12 times higher than their developed counterparts. So that is the huge issue. When a country is using most of its resources to pay interest rates, what does it impact? It impacts the public goods that it should be providing, social protection, digital inclusion, gender equality, gender-based gender financing, then gender budgeting. All this is impacted because what is the first aspect to get cut when a country is challenged with debt? It's a social aspect. It's a public good. So, right. And so we are having conversation with the IMF and the World Bank on austerity measures that are recommended to governments in these kinds of challenging environments. So it's important for us to look at the big picture and at the same time to understand. And it's very good to hear from you, the project that you're having with the Ivory Coast on the debt swap, which is debt for education swap. Increasingly, there is hesitation for a public good with the debt swap situation, but this is very encouraging that you are building a partnership in this space because this can really generate some innovative financing solutions. And so thank you for sharing the response with us and for clarifying what enabling environment actually means for UN Women. So with that, I would like to go to our next speaker, again to Emily. Emily, can you clarify for us? Can you share a powerful story? I know Women First having served on the grants committee for Women First for several terms, I see the powerful stories that we have to share with the world. And so please, can you share a powerful story that illustrates a kind of long-term transformative change that Women First enables, change that would have been unlikely under conventional short-term donor models. And if we are serious about closing the gender financing gap and scaling support for feminist funds, what are the top 3 shifts donors need to make starting now to turn their rhetoric into meaningful, sustainable action? Over to you, Emily. Emily, you're muted, please.
Okay. Thank you, Anita. And you have been with us a long time, and we're so appreciative of your support. And there are so many stories. You know, you've already heard from Doreen, and I'll just quickly go through two of them that I can think of. We support Rural Women's Uplift Society, or our WUS, in Manipur, India. And they had applied for about 30 grants by the time they came to us, and none of them had come through, and they were running out of time and resources. And after being recommended to us from a past grantee partner, they got the email from us, Women First, offering them 3 years of flexible, unrestricted funding. Their executive director, Mary Beth, exact quote from her is, we were so relieved when we knew Women First was providing multi-year funding. It gave us the opportunity to breathe, the opportunity to plan, and the opportunity to invest in our organizational infrastructure, even as we navigate daily ethnic conflict in the region. Ultimately, they set up an all-women's green market where women from the community could sell their produce. And they gave many women in the community the opportunity to gain income and in turn care for their families, access educational opportunities, seek healthcare, and gain more agency in the home. Since then, their leadership has gained worldwide recognition. They're amazing. And they've leveraged our support to secure additional funding from other partners, including FEME, the Urgent Action Fund, Women's Fund Asia, and Global Green Grants. So by investing in multi-year funding and building up their infrastructure, they are able to leverage additional resources so that when we walk away as a funder, they are still sustainable and actually more attractive to other funders, And I'll share one more story, and it's about one of my favorite women who lives in Tamil Nadu, and her name is Mamadou Banan, and she's a former bonded laborer. She founded the Rural Women's Development Trust, or RWDT. And when we first met her, her organization was literally unable to rent an office due to caste discrimination. They worked out of their homes or borrowed spaces, moving every few months to keep things going. And so with our long-term unrestricted support, everything began to change. They started a business where Dalit women created products from coconut husk fibers, generating jobs. They learned business skills and became experts at negotiating the market, basically cutting out the middleman and becoming the middle women. They established a community bank, allowing women who were previously excluded from financial services to save money, secure loans, and invest in their futures. And as a result, over 500 women had gone through who were earning less than $2 a day, went to earning $4 a day, doubling their incomes through small businesses. And I'm happy to report that just recently, our WDT now owns their own office space. So this, again, is not about just putting money into the hands of women. It's about creating structural change that addresses multiple forms of discrimination at once. And this is what real economic power looks like when women lead it. To answer your other question, I would say that 3 significant changes. We have to fund differently. We got to move beyond short-term project-based grants and provide multi-year flexible funding that allows these groups to lead, adjust to circumstances, and respond to the actual needs of their communities. We have to trust local leadership. Grassroots leaders are not high risk, they are high impact. By working through feminist funds that already have those relationships built on years of trust, a level of mutual accountability and due diligence, and a local presence on the ground, we can help strengthen their organizational sustainability in order to potentially scale their programs or increase participation or add elements to their programs to gain greater impact. We have to measure success differently. At Women First, we really measure our impact by gathering both quantitative and qualitative data. And this allows us to track not only increases in annual income, but also looks at the shifts in resources, power and agency, leadership skills, and organizational sustainability. We invest in change that lasts long after the funding ends. You know, I think that, you know, what gives me hope when I think about the times that we're in, as everyone has mentioned, is really meeting with these women and witnessing firsthand their leadership and resilience. I hope this conversation, there's a better understanding that feminist financing means shifting not just what we fund, but actually how we fund. And the models exist, the evidence is there. The only question is whether we're willing to act with courage that this moment demands. It's time to kind of walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Thank you, Emily, for those powerful response, because it paints the full picture. What is the reality? What does economic power actually look like in the hands of women? And what changes need to happen if these organizations are to continue, so not surviving, but thriving, because there is a lot of hope placed in women's funds, but also in the hands of these women who are doing tremendous amount of work, as Doreen shared with us earlier. So thank you for sharing your perspective, and thank you for the work that you do to ensure that women's voices are heard globally. With that, I would like to bring Carolyn Boyd. Carolyn, I have a question for you. As Fund Her Now engages new actors like the corporate sector to support feminist movements, what lessons have you learned about building cross-sector partnerships while staying grounded in feminist values? And finally, what keeps you motivated in this work? And what one message would you share with young feminist activists just starting out? Over to you, Carolyn.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat what's been said. I'm giving a nod to all that's been shared so far. I firmly believe that our strategies must be grounded in a framework of solidarity. This means setting aside the personal interests sometimes of our own funds and foundations and standing together for the common good using the strength of our collective power. While the voice of a single activist can challenge us to pause and rethink, the sustained collaboration of diverse actors united in purpose is a really powerful force for change. And what makes it powerful is the how in collaboration. We're members of several collaborative platforms, but I'll share one which feeds well into this discussion. 6 years ago, a group of women's funds based in Europe, I mean, we ourselves are in Croatia, and who engage in grant making in the global south and global east, came to the realization that despite being situated in Europe, despite having decades of experience in grant making, and despite being able to mobilize collectively over 20 million euros a year for grant making, we as women's funds were not able to access EU funding for re-granting specifically. We saw that funding streams open to civil society organisations were not reaching women-led organisations on the ground, and it was as clear as day that existing funding mechanisms were not fit for purpose, resulting in surface-skimmed solutions rather than resourcing those driving sustainable change on the ground. It's the ODA scenario all over again. So we formed a collective called Women's Funds Europe with the mission to change EU funding mechanisms by advocating for the removal of constraining factors, such as high levels of administration and grant sizes too large for most women's organisations to absorb, as most have average annual budgets, as we've heard, well under 50,000, and many, much less than that. Yet, who at the same time are engaging in work crucial to their communities, from service provision to democracy watchdogs. It would have been a mission impossible, so to say, for any single fund, but together we became a recognisable brand within the European Commission. We organised panels at the European Parliament, fed position papers into key policy processes on women's rights and gender equality, and worked side by side with other networks to push for change. We brought MEPs and other actors on board and built open, ongoing dialogue with top decision makers. So through collaboration, we went from being invisible and unknown to becoming a credible and consistent voice that is heard. And I won't lie, this has been a lot of hard work and a huge learning curve for us all involved. But as a collective, we've been able to share the responsibility and carry that weight together. One of the most concrete results of this collective effort so far was the launch by DG Justice at the European Commission of a pilot grant-making mechanism beginning in 2023, I think, based on the feminist funding model pioneered by Women's Funds Europe. This new resulting mechanism enabled women's funds and other grant makers to access EU resources for the first time, with 70% of those funds earmarked for re-granting through manageable grants tailored to the needs of grassroots women-led organisations. In addition, reporting requirements followed feminist principles, meaning no added administrative burden for grantees. So in just the first 2 years of this pilot, over 15 million euros has been mobilised by members of Women's Funds Europe, so giving us the means to support women-led groups to begin and sustain transformative work in their communities. And these are organisations who had never before received EU or bilateral funding. So from being told at the beginning that there are just, Carolyn, some things you cannot change, to seeing what tangible change can be achieved through collaboration is really inspiring. And that's what happens when we come together with a shared vision, speak with a collective voice, and act in solidarity. Yes, let's rejoice and celebrate our gains, that's important, but we mustn't be complacent. There's too much at stake. Currently here in Europe, there is a massive realigning of budgetary intentions at the EU as military ambitions and the demotion of gender equality dominate the debate. In response, we're currently building cross-sector support for a position paper that we've developed and which calls for the creation of a dedicated feminist budget line in the EU's upcoming multinational financial framework. Drawing on our experience and that of other feminist funds, we're proposing a comprehensive approach to gender-responsive budgeting, one that addresses both structural and operational needs, just as Emily's been saying. And our aim here is clear: to ensure that the EU's financial commitments truly align with its gender equality goals. This means moving beyond rhetoric. We've no time for that anymore. And providing sustainable, flexible support to feminist movements across Europe and beyond, so that they can continue driving the transformative change our societies need. You asked me about motivation. For me, it comes from the deep awareness that every one of us, no matter how small we may feel, has a role to play. I keep a little carved wooden spoon on my shelf by my desk in the office. It's a simple object, but a powerful reminder to me that there's always something I can contribute. However small, that contribution will bring some change to what's already there. It also reminds me that sometimes change doesn't come gently. Sometimes we really need to stir the pot and boldly and with purpose to get things moving. I came into the sector managing a fund for women victims of war in ex-Yugoslavia in the 1990s. And those were very dark times when unprecedented levels of violence destroyed lives and whole communities. But what I remember and hold on to most from those years is the beauty and resilience of the human spirit. That's perhaps my deepest motivation to keep walking the walk. So I suppose my message to young feminists starting out would be: dare to be bold and let hope be your compass. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you for giving us real perspectives to come to this space with. You talked about a strategy must be set in personal solidarity. We must be united in purpose, setting personal agenda and priorities aside. What a powerful call, because without collective effort, there's no way we can move the needle for people. Right? And especially for women in marginalized communities. But you also talked about the power of collective effort, even in the face of challenging funding space, as what you have done through the EU funding mechanism, Women's Funds Europe. It is important to stay the course, stir the pot, and keep to the core of your commitment. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. And I would like to welcome Doreen to the space. Doreen, what barriers has your organization encountered in accessing international funding? How does working with Feminist Fund differ, especially regarding access, accountability, and flexible support? Could you also share with us an example, such as during COVID crisis, when feminist funds enabled your organization not just to survive, but to build long-term change? Also, if the development finance system truly centered grassroots women, what one change do you believe would have the biggest impact for organizations like yours? Over to you, Doreen.
Thank you, Anita, once again. Some of the barriers that we face at Women of Influence in accessing international funding are we don't meet the eligibility criteria of some donors. You find that some funds or some calls require you to have bigger budgets. Some require you to have audited accounts of at least 5 years. But looking at Women of Influence, we are is 4 years old, okay? And another one is we lack relationships. Like I told you that grassroots organizations are led by young leaders who are coming from humble backgrounds. So we lack relationships with donors. Donors don't know us. And we have this philosophy that donors don't fund organizations, they fund people, meaning that excludes us from getting funds. The other one is this time around, donors have opted for recommendations. That denies us an opportunity to tell our story of the work we are doing. But at the same time, it denies the donors the opportunity of knowing the work we are doing on ground. The other problem is, the other issue is many of the application processes are very complex. You find that they are so long. They use technical language that is only understood by donors. But looking at some of the grassroots organizations, many of us lack skills. So you find that we are writing things that don't convince donors. The other question was, how does feminist fund differ? Allow me to answer this one by sharing my experience. My first donor was Women First International Fund. By then, the organization was 1 year old, and still is my current donor because I've not got any other donor. So starting with the application process. In fact, I saw the call from one of the grant partners, that was High Initiative. So I got the application right. I had to fill it. But when I was filling it, it just required me to tell my story and to show how I've been working in communities. They never asked me about me having a bank account or how much money do I have in the bank account. But also they never even asked me about any audited reports. So I found that process was very easy and easy to access Women First's fund. The other one is when you are in a relationship with an organization that give feminist fund, the funds are very flexible in such a way that they cover so many aspects. For example, the fund from Women First International Fund, they do cover the administrative costs. This includes renting office, paying for internet, paying for utilities. But also they respond to the society's changing needs. I should remind you that the communities we are living in are heterogeneous. They are very different. When we are writing the proposal in the opportunity stage, we had an idea of formalization of businesses. We thought that we would take to the community formalization of businesses where they will get bank loans, they will get government loans. But reaching on the ground, we find that the community we are working in is slum, meaning that if you take to them the loans, them having no business skills, they are likely not to sustain these the economic opportunities. So we had to go back to Women First and ask them if we could change the plan by starting with giving these women business skills, then the formalization will come later. And that's why now we are speaking a successful story. Had we gone with formalization, we could have been out. Okay. The other one is,
Thank you.
the Feminist Fund recognized that change is a process. Much as we want to see economic inclusion, but economic inclusion cannot happen in a single day. It takes time. That's why Women First's grant is for a partnership of 6 years. We believe at least within 6 years, we might have achieved the goal. The other question was how a feminist fund helped us beyond survival during COVID. While after COVID, while many of the organizations were shutting down, it was when Women of Influence was opening. We got Women First Fund in 2022. But by then, I had resigned from a law firm. Then I decided to do organization work. So I was doing the work at home. Sometimes I would go sit at the cafe without internet, or sometimes I would go to a friend's offices where you could spend around 4 hours getting to their office. So getting this fund from Women First, as Women of Influence, it has given us an identity, but also relevance to our communities, because the fund comes in 3 major aspects. The fund covers administration. The fund covers project costs. The fund also gives us capacity building. With administration, we have an office. The fund has also, with administration, it has given us structure, whereby today, the Women of Influence today is different from the Women of Influence in 2021. We did not have systems, we did not have a team, okay? But now, at least I'm happy to say that we are supporting around 30 women we have helped to get business skills. Like in business skills, they at least manage their finances well. But also we have helped them in the formalization of their businesses, which it has made them eligible to both bank loans and government loans. I am happy to say that this year we secured a certificate that makes 15 women to be eligible to government loan. That means that they can apply for government loans at any time. And these loans are of 0 interest and can be paid within a longer period of time. That is between 3 years to 5 years. So that's the impact Women First money is doing, or a feminist fund is doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doreen, for your passionate response, because you see the challenges more than any of us ever do, and you see the importance of flexible funding, and which is not an option. And Women First really pioneered a new way of funding through the initiatives that we did. And we see the impact that we're making because of what you're sharing with us. So deeply appreciate your perspective. And also we have UN Women here. I'm sure Bobo is hearing some of the challenges, because there is partnership across the whole board that is required. It's just not women funds, grassroots organizations, UN agencies, government, private sector. Everybody is needed if we are really talking about moving the needle. Now that all our speakers have shared with us very valuable insights, I would like to open the floor for questions. We received a few questions online, but before we do that, may I invite Anna or Evelyn to pose 1 or 2 questions. Pick 2, 3 questions that you receive, and ask people to raise 2 or 3 questions, and they can pose it directly to the speaker. So over to Anna or Evelyn.
I'm posting. We have 1 hand raised, Anita. I'm going to post in the meantime some of the questions we've received. There is Busayo Obisakin, who is raising her hand.
Okay, go ahead. If you could just unmute Busayo, and then she could raise that question.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. In fact, when I saw the topic of this discussion, I was excited, because for the fact that you want us to discuss this has made our day. I want to say that the word of Doreen resonates so much on us. I work in Nigeria. Women Inspiration Development Center, we developed the personal agency of disenfranchised women and girls in Nigeria to find their voices, to discover their power, and to be able to live their dreams. My organization have been working for the past 15 years. And I can't talk more about issue of funding. I want to say that I want to thank Women First, because I've never heard that an organization is working that way. You know, the issue of proposal alone is enough to kill we that are the grassroots. This last General Assembly, I had to fund myself to attend the General Assembly. I want to voice out the issue of funding to grassroots NGOs. We hear a lot of amount of money entering our country for this gender equality, but we don't know where it's going, because most of us that are working, that are really working with people, we are not seeing the grants, we are not getting the fund. And Doreen has talked a lot on the kind of issues that are facing us, because it's the same all over. But what I want to also chip in is the fact that, you know, as an organization that have been working for 15 years, I can't still boast of maintaining 2 permanent staff because of fund. I use money to feed my own family, to pay salaries of the people that I'm retaining. If you don't have projects, there's no way you can continue paying salary, because you don't have fund that is for that kind of a thing.
Busayo, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but if you have a question for any of the speakers, could you raise
Yes,
that?
I want to ask question, please. How can we do it in such a way that, as we are discussing now, to walk the talk, to reduce the burden of proposal, one, to bring the reality of the grassroots NGO to asking in our proposal, when we have a call for proposal, bring the reality of the grassroots NGO into what you will be asking, and then focus on their experience, not the big budgets they have, because most of them, most of us don't have the kind of the big budget the funders will be asking for. So what are we going to tell you that we have in our budget? There are some people that are still waiting for many years to get fund, to be able to say, I have this budget, I have been funded with this kind of money before. These are the things I want to chip in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Busayo. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to invite Mebra. I think she's raised her hand. Mebra, would you like to share your question? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mebra Nduga. I work with a Men Initiative in Uganda. My ask is, we work with LGBTQ women in Uganda. And right now, the context in Uganda is criminalization, poverty, and exclusion. They are all structural. And how can feminist funding, because usually feminist funding is about, often stops at visibility, but visibility in our context can be life-threatening. So how can we concentrate and steps further into women funding that ensure that our models are not only inclusive to LGBTQ women voices, but protective, resourced, and also radical in the face of the anti-gender backlash that we are facing right now as a movement. Also in Uganda, we are facing a lot of the anti-rights movement, which are targeting movements, feminist movements, they're targeting LGBTQ movements. So how can we move from a symbolic inclusion into a material solidarity kind of funding as a movement in Uganda? Because right now we are having the Anti-Homosexuality Act into place, the law is into place, and we cannot access funding at the moment. Everything is so grounded. So how can the feminist movement or the feminist fund raise into funding not only the visibility thing, but also ground into the protective with the resourced and also inclusive to our movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mebra. I think we have, so we'll go with these two questions. And so if each speaker can share your perspective on that, and as well as we have posted 2 or 3 questions in the chat. So please take a look at the questions and you can answer any of them. So may I request Bobo to come to the first, if you can share your response. What's UN Women's perspective on some of the concerns that have been shared?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the issue, at least some of the issue that that I heard about are real. We clearly understand where, you know, this is coming from. I think from UN Women perspective, we operate in different environments. You know, as we work through various programs. I lead several programs that we implement in country offices. Of course, each country has its own reality and you know, constraint, I would say. So, you know, there's no obviously one size fit all approach. So my point is that when we work in this environment, it's really important to work with local grassroots organization from the beginning, from the start of the implementation of the project, from the design of the project. You need to have all of these aspect in mind. So when you draft the proposal, you have to have a situation analysis that look at different aspects, different issues that you face within the country in which you are operating, whether or not it's a country-specific project or a global project that operate in several regions or countries. You need to bring that first and account for all of these issues when you design the project. And then when you move into implementation, you have to identify partners on the ground from the get-go with whom you are going to be partnering. If there are grants to be issued, you need to have teams that are already in place to work with many of these organizations, but you also need to have people on board within UN Women on the ground also to have that kind of expertise to deal with some of these issues. So it's really important to really have more like a holistic approach to be able to address some of these issues. Many of those issues we are aware of because, you know, access to finance, you know, whether it's from the NGO organization or a small business owner, are always the same, right? The constraint from the private sector in terms of unlocking this finance, the challenges are always the same. So some of those issues can be addressed more broadly, but there are also country specificity that you need to take into account to be able to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobo. So I have a follow-up question too. Based on what you are seeing at the FfD4 and the outcomes coming, and you talked about partnerships with the ILO, and I'm thinking you're also involved with the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection.
Yeah.
So how do you see some of these partnerships and collaboration changing the situation for women on the ground? And if you could just share briefly about what's your expectation coming out of FfD4.
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm actually one of 2 UN Women colleagues that are representing UN Women on the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection. So I'm very excited of being part of this initiative because, you know, to go back to what I was saying earlier, you need to think ahead, right? When you design this program. So the way the Global Accelerator was designed was to bring many of these agencies together, right? From different perspectives. So you have UN Women, you have ILO, you have UNICEF, you have UNDP, WFP, FAO, which are these different organizations, right, with different expertise, and the way it was designed to make sure that collectively, we take advantage, right, of the personal strength of each agency. So the role of UN Women, for instance, in this process is to make sure that the design of project, before the project is designed, UN Women is there to identify the gaps. What are the gender gaps? When you talk about you talk about employment, access to employment, what are the gaps? And how can we address this gap? When we talk about access to social protection, what are the gender dimension of social protection? What can we do to make sure that women have access to social protection? And that's where UN Women comes in. But of course, we're working with ILO, who is an expert also on the issue of employment and social protection. So some of that technical aspect of the work, the concept of establishing a social protection system, ILO has that expertise. So ILO and UN Women can come together. You can bring in UNICEF. When you talk about the issue of children, UNICEF is here. UNDP has expertise on development on the ground. So bringing all of these agencies together, right, allows you really to take advantage of the strength of each agency in an integrated way. Whether you're talking about financing, whether you talk about food securities, you have WFP and FAO. So together, as you can see, the way the Global Accelerator came together really allowed really a one UN kind of framework to be able to work as one agency, but taking advantage of the strength of each agency. And that's how the Global Accelerator approaches this. As part of the FfD process, we are also involved, but together as a team. So not only each UN agency is already working on the FfD process, but the Global Accelerator as a team is also working on it to make sure that we bring this perspective, that working together and everyone bringing their expertise. So it's a way of multiplying really our input, right, into the process. Not just each agency is going on its own, but we are also there as a team of UN agencies.
Thank you so much, Bobo. Thank you for highlighting the importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships. But also we are hoping that out of this comes an opportunity for organizations on the ground, especially grassroots women's organization, to engage in some of these processes, because it's very crucial that it just does not stay at the global level, but it really comes to the ground. And so we will collaborate to see how we can engage in some of these areas. With that, I would like to ask Emily if she would like to share any responses, and then followed by Doreen, and if we could just wrap up, that would be great. We have about 7 minutes to wrap up. And Carolyn, please. Yeah. So Emily, do you have, would you like to share a closing and also a response to one of the?
I'm muted. Yeah, hold on. Okay. I just want to respond to the participant who was talking about what's happening in Uganda, and mentioned that at Women First, we're very aware and worried about the situation. We just joined the Fund Our Futures, which is a pooled initiative which seeks to move resources specifically targeting LGBTQ people, including those specifically in East Africa. And, we understand that safety and security of our partners is paramount. And we're planning this year to establish a community of practice in order to, around safety and security, and bring in our grantee partners so that, we listen and learn and hear the solutions that they are already implementing, and basically support them. And I guess I would end with just kind of all of us asking a question, are we showing up in ways that match the scale of the change we say we want to see? And I think it is really important in designing whatever we're designing, and there's no one road or one answer, but if you don't have civil society presented, if they're not at the table and telling you real time what their experiences are and what solutions they've found, you run the risk of just implementing policies, programs, and procedures that are just not going to be effective.
Thank you, Emily. I'd like to invite Carolyn. Carolyn, any last thoughts or response to a question?
Yeah, just very briefly, I heard someone in the chat say, you know, how can we find feminist funds? I'm sure they could contact Women First. We all belong to the Prosper International Network of Women's Funds. There's 42 feminist funds globally that will give you access to funding. So please contact Women First. We heard what the UN Women are doing, what women's funds do. We raise the questions. So we challenge institutions to change their funding models. We would love bilateral funding to move completely flexible. That's not going to happen overnight. But what we can do is move the 5% for admin and core costs to at least 25%. So let's try and see that happen. And also I would invite any of you to join our advocacy platform at the EU. We're also working on the new GAP4 program. Now GAP4 is the funding model for the Global South. We're wanting them to also implement feminist funding models as we've seen in the European Union. So please, again, contact Women First if you want to join us in that. And just the closing word for me is the time is now. We stand up and we dare to be bold. Too much is at stake, so let's be bold. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you, Carolyn. I just have a follow-up question to you. Could you speak, are you exploring innovative sources of financing, such as blended finance, some of the tools that Bobo had earlier mentioned in the swaps, etc.? Are you exploring any of that in your conversations with regard to gender? You're muted, sorry.
Sorry, and I think it's also important to mention in that conversation that gender equality isn't just a closed topic, it's cross-cutting. It's hitting climate change, it's hitting economic empowerment, it's hitting access to digital resources. Gender equality is just so much bigger. So yeah, women's funds, we're looking at all sorts of new mechanisms. Time's running out. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Doreen. Would you like to share closing thoughts and a response to a question if you'd like?
Thank you so much. What I can say is that our common problem or issues as grassroots organization is funds. So I will call upon donors to shift more fundings to grassroots organizations. However, the fund should do it in a feminist way. Easy to access, very flexible and trust-based. We grassroots organization, we work with passion and we know how to do the work on ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So with that, we are at 3:58. I'd like to close this meeting, but I'd also like to share, we had an incredibly brilliant discussion with a lot of insights shared by all our speakers. The call is upon us as to how we take this information that we receive, how do we take it to move the needle, really walk the talk, right? As Carolyn shared with us, what is it that we can do for those women who are on the ground, who are not at any of these sessions, but the challenges are the ones that they are facing the most. It's also to understand that the same countries that are facing climate challenges, where many of these women who are marginalized and challenged are also living in. So it's just not an issue of debt or tax, it's an issue of intersectionality of a series of challenges that are essentially translating to women, because many situations, that's what happened. Women are the ones who are the most marginalized. And thank you to Women First for giving this voice. Thank you to UN Fund for giving a voice to the challenges that we see for women. And thank you to all our partners in this space for being here and supporting this effort. So on that note, I would like to close the session. And if anybody else would like to stay for a quick chat, I can do that too.
Anita, I'd like to thank you for just being such a fierce advocate, not only for Women First International, but for all women, and especially the women on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. It means a lot, and very happy to all our board members who joined and all our partners, staff members of Women First who are here in the space, because they are the ones who hold the torch for women and make it happen every day. So on that note, I'll close. And Emily, if you want to stay back for a few minutes, happy to stay.
Bye, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.